Hello and thanks for joining us for a late night newscast coming to you from Arirang's News Centre in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. And we start with the second round of reunions for families separated by the Korean War. And it has been another emotionally charged day at the Mount Gumgang Resort in North Korea as families torn apart by the Korean War are seeing each other again for the first time in well over 6 decades. They'll have 2 more precious days together on Sunday and Monday. For the details on the first day, we connect to our Unification Ministry correspondent Song Ji-sun, who's standing by at the Inter-Korean Dialogue headquarters in Seoul. Ji-sun.
As I saw firsthand in the first round of reunions, participants from the 2 Koreas have called on the governments to hold these kind of events on a regular basis and more hopefully reunification so that they could one day live together before it's too late. 90 South Korean families who sought their families living in the north, whose hometowns are also mostly located on the northern side of the border, finally met their loved ones. Seeing his son, who is now in his 70s, South Korea's oldest participant, 98-year-old Lee Seok-ju, said he was devastated that this will be the first and last time he will be able to see his son after waiting for 65 years.
얼른 하나같이 해가지고 2, 3년 가족이 없어야 되는데 남들 가면 아들한테 내려가면 여기를 다시 못 보겠다.
아버지가 더 오래 장소에서 총통일까지 봐야 되잖아.
To 86-year-old Chun Gu-myung, his wife that he left in his hometown in the north is still so beautiful even after 6 decades.
그렇게 이쁜데
예뻐요.
키가 작아. 근데
여기 앉아 계시니까 그렇지.
그때 키 컸는데.
Now, those are just a couple of heartbreaking stories we have to share here. And with that, day 1 of the 3-day reunion came to a close this morning, this evening with a banquet hosted by North Korea. There will be an individual reunion session on Sunday morning where they get to exchange gifts in the privacy of their hotel rooms. Mark?
Yeah, Ji-sun, hearing those stories is, of course, extremely moving and sad. It's hard to comprehend what those people and the tens of thousands of other separated families have had to go through. We also heard during our last newscast at 6 p.m. that there are other families reuniting, those who were not separated by the Korean War, but whose stories are equally heartbreaking. Tell us about those.
Yes, there are special cases like these 2 families who got to meet their family members who were abducted by North Korea during and after the Korean War. Now, 88-year-old Lee Bok-soo met her son Chung Gun-muk, who is now 64, and abducted by North 43 years ago. He was taken along with 24 other crew members aboard a fishing boat in the West Sea in 1972. Showing his family in the north, Chung comforts his weeping mother, saying he's content with his life in North Korea.
저 세상에 살아있어? 근심걱정이 살고 있어.
Now, thousands of South Koreans are thought to have been kidnapped by the North during and after the war, but Pyongyang has never officially acknowledged that fact. And now we'll keep you updated throughout the second round of the reunions. Back to you, Mark.
Well, thank you ever so much for that report, Ji-sun. That was our Song Ji-sun reporting at the Inter-Korean Dialogue headquarters in Seoul on that reunion event for war-separated families. Now, in other news, US Defense Secretary Ashton Carter will visit South Korea next week for talks on North Korea's missile and nuclear programs. Speaking at the Pentagon on Friday local time, Carter said he will be discussing the ability of the South Korea-US alliance to respond to North Korean provocations. He said there was a constant potential for provocations of all kinds. Carter added that he will visit the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, during his trip, but didn't offer any specific details. A South Korean source says Carter will be here for the annual security talks. They're known as the Security Consultative Meeting and will be held with his South Korean counterpart, Han Min-gu. South Korea's rival political parties remain at loggerheads over the government's recent decision to reintroduce state-authored history textbooks for the nation's secondary schools. The ruling Saenuri Party is calling on the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy to stop pouring fuel on an ideological row. It says the Liberal Party should instead focus on passing urgent livelihood bills and making headway in labour market reforms to create more jobs. The ruling party's calls are falling on deaf ears, though. The NPAD is continuing to hold protests against the decision, urging citizens to join their movement. It says a textbook set to be reintroduced in 2017 would restrict the diversity of views central to a strong democracy. Hurricane Patricia has weakened to a tropical storm now after hitting land on the Pacific coast of Mexico. Torrential rain and winds of over 250 kilometers an hour had initially lashed coastal areas when it first made landfall, but it's much calmer now. As you can see from the video there, the winds have weakened to around 120 kilometers since then. Now, the U.S. National Hurricane Center said Patricia was, at one point at least, the strongest storm ever recorded in the Western Hemisphere, despite its strength weakening and being rather strong when it hit. Officials say the storm has not caused the widespread damage that many predicted, and no fatalities have been reported as of now, at least. But the Mexican government has warned the country against letting its guard down. Experts say the risk of life-threatening flash floods and mudslides remains. Now, fatal road accidents are always shocking, of course, but it's not often they are mourned by a whole nation. But that's exactly what is happening in France after the country's worst traffic disaster in more than 3 decades. Ji Myung-gil reports.
At least 43 people were killed on Friday when a bus carrying retirees on a sightseeing trip in the French wine country smashed head-on into a truck and caught fire. The crash occurred on a forested bend of a 2-lane road near the village of Puisgang, 60 kilometers east of Bordeaux.
The truck carrying a wood trailer hit the bus on a sharp bend in the road, causing both vehicles to burst into flames.
The truck is believed to have veered onto the wrong side of the road as it came around the bend. According to the mayor, the bus driver who survived saw the crash coming and opened the bus door so people would be able to escape. The truck driver and his 3-year-old son, who was in the cab, were among the dead, with 8 others suffering injuries. French President François Hollande called the crash an immense tragedy and promised to launch an investigation.
I will discuss the matters with the Prime Minister, the Interior and Transport Ministers to take necessary measures.
President Hollande expressed the solidarity of the whole nation with the victims' loved ones. The public prosecutor said it was too early to draw conclusions on what caused the accident, stressing the police were focused on identifying the dead first. A spokesman for the Interior Ministry said that as far as he could tell, all the bus passengers were French. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, Hollywood is rallying around Hillary Clinton in her bid to become US president next year, according to an LA Times analysis, which used a computer algorithm and manual reporting to classify donors by sector. Hollywood donors have contributed $5.5 million to campaigns so far, $5 million of which has gone to Clinton as of the end of last month. Her biggest showbiz donors include Steven Spielberg and director of the new Star Wars movies, J.J. Abrams. Jeb Bush came in second with a relatively paltry $165,000 from Hollywood. Now, today is UN Day, a day dedicated to the global efforts and achievements of the world body. We're going to take a look at Korea's special partnership with the United Nations, one that has played an important role in Korea's modern history, including the establishment of the nation's government. Kim Min-ji reports.
The UN has supported South Korea through various historic events. It played an important role in the establishment of the South Korean government in 1948 after its independence from Japanese colonial rule. When North Korean forces invaded South Korea 2 years later, the UN dispatched its forces and recommended that all member states assist the South. Support continued even after the conflict ended, with Seoul receiving economic and medical assistance. Eventually, in 1991, both South and North Korea were granted UN membership. Since then, South Korea has gradually expanded its presence on the global stage on the back of vast economic development to evolve from aid recipient to donor nation. Its contribution to the UN regular budget has also increased over the past years, becoming the 13th largest contributor in 2014.
Korea's place in the world has dramatically changed in line with the world's transformation. Korea's unique experiences of overcoming colonial occupation, internecine war, and poverty can be used for the benefit of humanity.
The former war-torn country has also taken on leading roles within the global organization. Former Prime Minister Han Seung-soo sat on the General Assembly presidency in 2001 and 2002, while current Secretary General Ban Ki-moon assumed office as the head of the UN in 2007.
We are now using our increased capacity and ability. We are now paying back to UN in many ways. Particularly, we are increasing our development assistance to many developing countries.
South Korea has been actively involved in cooperative projects with the UN for the development of poverty-stricken or war-hit countries. And just as it's done for the past 70 years since the establishment of the UN, Korea hopes to deepen its ties with the global body and increase its role in the world, working towards peace and democracy. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, in some sports news, South Korea is through to the knockout stages of the Under-17s World Cup in Chile after a 0-0 draw with England. The Taeguk Warriors top Group B with 7 points after 2 previous victories over Guinea and Brazil. South Korea's round of 16 match will kick off at 8 a.m. Korea time on Thursday. We still don't know who they'll play, but it will be against the third-place side from either of Groups A, C or D. And since Chile finished third in Group A, there is the possibility South Korea could play the host nation. And finally, taking a brief look at the weather here in Korea, and it's going to be a relatively mild and dry night with the overnight low only dipping to 13 degrees Celsius in Seoul. Sunday will be a dry and mostly clear day for most regions. The afternoon highs nationwide will be in the low 20s. With that, let's get a check on the weather around the world. Well, those are the stories we have for you at this hour. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.com/news. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye.